This?
Yeah.
Ah, that's your question? That's the okay. All right, how deep an answer do you want? So
Well, it's linked to your site, the homepage of which has Doom quotes.
Yes. Dune is my favorite book. I recommend it to everyone tirelessly. And typing this way is very complicated, so I'm trying to type GitHub. Oh God, this is not gonna work. GitHub.com/trevoke/lc. Can I autocomplete this yet?
Yeah.
It's done. Magic. Hopefully magic.
Oh, LC is not what you want to get in.
Nope.
Not anything with L.
All right. So LC17-intro to Elixir, I think. Maybe. Just no. Do you have any idea how hard this is to do? Let's do github.com/trevoke. Then you guys can guide me to the rest. I want to go to my repositories. Hopefully it's this one. Cool. So, rabbit hole. I wrote mine in org mode, in Emacs. Is this index.org?
Yes. Yeah.
Cool. GitHub, thankfully, renders org mode pretty nicely. So I wrote this, right? You might recognize some of this stuff as the slides that you saw.
Whoa.
What?
No, that's the whole slide deck.
That's the whole slide deck.
Yeah.
And if you want to look at the raw plain text of it, it's kind of ugly. But I don't see this in Emacs. I see something prettier. It looks like that. And I used an Emacs package that converts an org mode file like this to a Reveal.js presentation.
Reveal.js.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, the first question you asked, yeah. But I figured you weren't going to be content with just that answer. So I like Emacs a lot, so I show it off. This blog entry is kind of mind-bending. It's really, really cool. I think you now have the ability to walk through it and understand what's going on. So I highly recommend it. It is a lot of fun. Have I left anything after this? I think. But yes, I have bonus material. We talked about railway programming like 6 hours ago. So keep in mind, this is code that I just made up. There's no API that exists where this will work. But originally, what I thought I might do with you was help you build a distributed poker game where there's a table and people can join and play. And then I ran into trouble with whatever VMs I might be using and whether I could actually do that and connect and such. And I gave up. So here is how this works. It's a little uglier than I wanted it to be because this if-else is not super easily indented. With is a keyword that specifies that as long as you call deck.deal with an original deck and the number 5, right? And what you get back is the tuple OK, some variable you assign to new deck 1, some variable you assign to hand 1, right? And if you do that again with new deck 1, and you get OK, new deck 2, hand 2, right? And then you do poker.rank hand 1, and you get OK and hand 1 rank. And then if you do poker.rank hand 2, and you get OK, hand 2 rank, right? Like this is all, by the way, dependent on the previous step having succeeded, right? If at some point this doesn't succeed, we will fall through to this else. And these are the two things I made up as possible error messages, because why not? So assuming you get a tuple that begins with error and has not enough cards in deck, you would return out of whatever this is, error, not enough cards, original deck. I don't know what this is. If you happen to get error and anything else back, you just say error, could not compare hands, and return the original deck. Right? And I just realized that my API sucks. But assuming hand 1 rank is greater than hand 2 rank, you return OK, player 1 wins. And I should also return the new deck here, clearly. I'm just not doing that. Otherwise, OK, player 2 wins. And I should also return the new deck here. So this is essentially railway programming Elixir version. If I had been smarter, I would have come up with a cleaner example that actually uses the same data structure and folds all the way through, because that's nice. But this is a way of saying you can actually pull together from various systems, and if at any point you have a failure, you can short circuit and just do something that is a safe exit or an exit that makes sense for you.
That's basically essentially possible because of this width.
Yeah.
Doing all the work.
Yeah, width is doing all the work.
With this thing, comma, this thing, comma, this thing.
Right, yeah. And here we have the opposite of this arrow that you asked about before, right? This is saying whatever comes out of here, match it to that. So you're defining the left side is the return value of the right-hand side.
It's just like a promise in a way where you're.
Sort of.
The second thing is depending on the return value of the first thing, and so on and so forth.
Yes. In that sense, yes. Right? Like, as long as these are functional enough, then you can do stuff without breaking everything else, and so it doesn't matter what you do. But if you were doing things here that aren't functional, like there are side effects, things change, you go to the database, whatever, then somewhere in here, you would have to fix those problems in some fashion, right? Or do a two-phase commit or whatever.
Yeah. Okay.
Right?
You would have to roll back.
Right.
Yeah.
Like this gives you the tool to do that, but it's up to you to write code that doesn't make this absolutely disgusting like that, right? Don't do that. I'm a bad programmer. Don't copy my example.
You gotta wonder if there's a presenter who's ever like, this is great code. This is perfect code. I'm teaching everyone. I want everyone to know.
Well, I mean,
Every presenter says this is bad code.
I mean, to be fair, I mean, I completely started off saying this is perfect and I'm a god among men, but you guys found so many mistakes. I had to pivot, like I had to change plan. Anonymous recursion, because who on their right mind wouldn't want to do that, right? It's possible in Elixir. It requires a little bit of a shim, which is you define a function that has RET2 and takes a function. You assign that to a function, and then all you have to do is pass that same function, the function to itself. Come on.
It's pretty cool.
Yes.
Does it still do the automatic TCO? For...
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Well, actually, yes, it will. It will. It will realize that this is the reference to the same function. It just can't do it from inside because while you're defining the anonymous function, it doesn't exist yet. Like it has no root frame of reference.
And that's an Erlang.
I mean, this is
The tail call is that happens.
yes, yeah. I have some code samples. You can see how amazing my code is. You saw some of this already. I think you guys saw this earlier. I wrote FizzBuzz just to prove to myself I could do it. I ended up with that. I have no idea if this is close or far away from what you guys wrote.
Is there, do people usually just use maps for storing data, or is there like a data class type that's something similar to a data class?
Ooh. Okay. I generally use maps because they're simpler, but he asked a question like 5 hours ago about structs and records. It is possible to create a module and define parameters on it so that you essentially have a named, let's call it a named map, something like this. It has more restrictions on it than a regular map. It's used almost entirely the same way, but you can restrict what can go into it.
And default parameters, I mean,
Yes, it has default parameters, which is very useful.
the culture is mostly just passing maps around, kind of like closure.
I would not claim that. It is what I default to, That might be because I've stared at Emacs too much and written too much Lisp. That just might be my failing. There is value in defining structs in large part because that allows you to write better type specs with dialyzer.
Oh yeah, that's a related question. How have you used that a lot? Just like what's your experience like?
So I have used dialyzer very little. I've used it a little bit. My experience with it is generally positive. It has one major downside. The error messages are very hard to read. And the reason you use it is because of the error messages. So it's not there yet. But I'm working with Elixir. I'm working in production with Elixir, right? It's my, it is the stack that I'm working with. And the other senior dev actually gave a talk on dialyzer at the New York City Elixir meetup a couple weeks ago. So he probably knows how it works.
There was a talk on it last year here, I think, about.
Oh yeah?
But it wasn't specifically in the context of Elixir. It was in the context of.
Oh, I saw that talk online. Yes, I liked it. It was quite useful, actually. I think I have one more code sample before I admit that this is the end of the material and then start taking you through my side projects because I'm just so excited about it. Oh yeah, we skipped that exercise. I was going to make you guys do guess the number. And then I decided that you guys, I could spare you that indignity. Although, all jokes aside, this is one of my favorite little programs to write to learn a new language. Because you do randomness, you do input, output, combinations. This is not necessarily the best implementation, but it's a good one. Like it shows things.
I don't understand why. So in partial application, you usually put the data at the very end.
Yeah.
Because it's getting.
Right, partially evaluated, partially applicated, yeah.
And but in here, you don't, but it still works the same.
Well, you don't really do partial application here.
Like, so IO gets your guess is then kind of like passed into trim.
Yeah, the output.
Which is passed into
Correct.
integer. I guess so you only ever pipeline to functions that have one argument.
No, you can pipeline to functions that have multiple arguments, but the first argument will be whatever gets passed through the pipeline. So in elm.map, you would then only write the function for the transformation, right? Because it would have received the data structure through the pipe.
Oh, okay. I see. The way I imagine pipes is like it kind of moves to the right and gets pushed in the back, but this is actually like going into the pipe and pushing it down.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Yeah. Well,
It's like, so you're saying that rather than come into the pipe, is the first premise or the last premise?
the first one. So
That's the first one. That would otherwise define you had 3 parameters would have been the first and last 3.
yeah, so if let's say string.trim took 2 arguments, right? You would only have to write the second argument on the line for string.trim, because the first argument would be filled in by the pipeline.
It would make the trim look like it only takes one argument.
Yes,
Which
exactly.
is one argument, and then
Right.
this is maybe I can explain what it helps me visually. Like in Elm, you design your functions in a way where whatever your data is the last argument in the function because
That's
it's
in Elm, it's actual partial application.
Yeah,
This
right.
Yeah.
This is different.
Yeah,
This is
yeah.
pipe, yeah.
Yeah.
So in Elm, I imagine it like, okay, you have this list or this string, and you have this function with like a few other things that are
Yeah.
getting in there already, and this string goes to the end of it and gets popped in as the last
Right.
argument, and then this evaluates and gets popped into the next one as the
Mhm.
last argument. But here, instead, it's your data is the first
Yes.
argument, and so it's like this kind of goes in this way and gets put in. If there's an argument there already, it would kind of like push that one
Yes.
to the second or the third, whatever.
I guess it's just a macro. Or is it
What, the pipe operator?
yeah, right.
I never wondered, but I'm pretty sure it's a macro. Yeah.
That's what I was just thinking, because in Clojure they actually have 2 macros to do both. Put it in the first or the last.
Okay. Of course, Clojure would have that. I mean, it's just. All right. So I think this is the end. There's no more arrows to the bottom, no more arrows to the right.
Quick question, Ned. Sounds like you've used Amnesia with Elixir. Have you had any opportunity to like try and interface Elixir with the like SQL databases or anything?
Yeah. I've used Ecto, which is what everyone with Elixir uses, right? Everyone uses with Elixir right now. The experience is mixed. I like the idea of Ecto a lot. It does a couple of things really, really well, and it built a pretty reasonable macro system around building SQL-like things in Elixir that transform pretty much, visually to SQL. But there are things that are complex about it, like trying to figure out how to do preloads or joins. Sometimes it's sometimes not obvious. Like you have to, like with every other ORM, you have to learn how it thinks, and it's not there yet as far as being more intuitive. Of course, I say intuitive from the perspective of I know SQL, please don't bother me. There's lots of people who come from a different perspective, which is I don't know SQL, please don't bother me, right? So it's relative. But Ecto overall is good, and Ecto has adapters for Amnesia, for SQLite, for Postgres, for MySQL. So it is one united interface to interface with all of that. Basically.
Are you using Phoenix as well? Or?
Yeah. And we're using Phoenix as essentially the API app, right? The API layer for our system. Well, no, because the front end is React Native, so it's a mobile app, right? But because Elixir allows us to actually create what they call umbrella projects, which are a project that has multiple applications in it, it's very, very painless to have one application be the Phoenix app, and then all that does is WebSockets and HTTP, right? And then you just don't do anything that is persistent or business logic in there if it doesn't relate to API work.
Do you find that you actually do a lot of OTP and Gen server and all that stuff, or do you kind of just use Phoenix? Or
so the beginning of it was a lot of Phoenix work. I mean, we're connecting to APIs from other systems, but we are building a data pipeline, so we're going to have a need for GenStage, which is like the Elixir version of Kafka, essentially. It lets you set up producers and consumers and do data transformations in a very idiomatic fashion, which is very nice. Well, we're done, but.
Is your Phoenix really using, so your Ecto and your Phoenix, like sort of separate things?
They are separate things.
And you have applications where you don't have Phoenix involved and you're using Ecto?
Yes. Sorry, I think I didn't fully answer your question.
just how much like OTP do you
Oh, right.
find
Yes.
you actually use?
Right. So not a lot right now. We're going to build GenStage and Flow because we're going to get a bunch of data that will need to be processed, and we will have to do a sort of queue of HTTP requests that will be done through tasks probably or something like it, so that we might have a task supervisor to make sure that stuff works pretty well. But frankly, because my side project is so entirely deeply OTP, I feel like I'm not doing any of it. Frankly, it comes down to, I think, the project management tool mix. sets you up with a supervision tree, and then you're kind of done thinking for a while. Whereas, what I had to do with my project was constantly add things to the application and supervision tree and change that and add more projects, add more. So I was architecting a very complex process tree. Most apps just aren't that complicated.
Yeah, I just wondered, I come from kind of just a regular web
Yeah.
background, and so the OTP stuff and all that, it seems really cool. And like I read, I think it was Sasha Jurek's book.
Yeah.
Where he,
Elixir in
it's
action,
like
I think.
One of the best I've seen that actually
Mhm.
gets into how you would build a system using all that stuff.
Yeah.
Then I'm still kind of like, if I'm just going to build an API or even a bunch of microservices, like I'm sort of at a loss still of like how much I would really
So
use it.
the biggest benefit that you get, like almost for free, out of using OTP and things like that, is the circuit breaker pattern. Raise your hand if you're familiar with the circuit breaker pattern. Like, all right, almost nobody. So the idea when you're building a system is that you're going to be working with generally a bunch of other systems, right? Like you have to talk to another HTTP API or a database or other systems. And these other systems, of course, you have no control over them. So something might happen. They might get slow, they might die. And over the long run, the worst thing that can happen to a system is that it gets slow. If it dies, it dies. Like it's dead. But if it's slow, you might not notice, right? So it's generally better for your code to, when it has to talk to an external system, have a sort of a tripwire where it says, if this request takes longer than 200 milliseconds, I'm going to just shut this down and stop it. And so I can do my work and not be stopped by this. So it's easier to set up SLA, if you will, for a bunch of things, because you can create timeouts at very, very discrete points in your system. The circuit breaker pattern is more complex, as in you can trip something and it'll stop. And then if it trips multiple times, if it goes, let's say, more than 3 times in 5 minutes, it will actually just stop connecting to the system for X amount of time. And then it'll try one connection. And if that works, it'll reopen the floodgates, right? But that means your system is resilient because it doesn't depend on some other system being up. If the other system is slow or down, your system will just not try to talk to it. So there's a lot of benefits you get from actually building in those boundaries around your system through OTP. And because Phoenix is an OTP app, because mixed projects are OTP apps, if you do a supervision tree, it's all kind of taken care of for you transparently, so you don't necessarily have to think about it. But it's really good to know it's there because your process generally has more than one responsibility, right? If you're in Phoenix, there's somebody waiting for the response.
But you haven't had to do too much of like all those different strategies for the supervision trees and the one for one for many, all that.
No, I'm looking for a reason to use simple one for one still. I haven't used the reason to do one for many or siblings. I've used one for one a lot. But yeah, all of it was my side project, right? Like the only reason I know so much about OTP is because what I did was build processes. That was it. That was all I wanted to do. So I have Dorf processes and bird processes and location processes. And I have a lot of fun with it, so so it works.
Thank you for sharing your game. I think you also had like a tick process. Is
Yes.
that like the time of your world?
Yes, it is the heartbeat of the world.
So would that contact every other process in the entire system?
It will send a message to every process that fits a particular description. Okay, I can explain this kind of hand-wavy, but so we know you can refer to processes with a PID, and we know you can refer to processes with their name if they have one, right? There is another way to refer to processes through a process called a registry, which keeps track of an identifier and a PID. And that keeps track of updating its reference so that if the process dies and gets restarted, the registry will get the update, so it points to the correct PID. So you don't have to know the name of the process because maybe they don't have a simple name. Like in my case, I have 1,000 dwarves and they're all like dynamically generated, so their IDs are unique. I have no idea how to get to any one of them, but I don't have to, right? Like other processes just have to go and find them. So finding a way to refer to them by their unique ID is good enough. I'm losing track of what I was explaining. Sorry, what was your question?
No, it's fine too, but I have this idea that maybe you had one clock that was
Oh, right, the heartbeats.
posting a million messages everywhere.
Actually, right now, that's kind of what's happening. And so what that does is every 2 or 3 seconds, it actually asks a registry for every single PID, every single process that is, I called it subject to time. And it gets a list of processes back, and it just sends the message tick to all of them. They receive the message tick. They do whatever my amazing AI tells them to do. It's a random number. But I might actually be able to show you some of that stuff. Maybe.
That's just why you get it.
Yeah, right?
And as opposed to a registry, could you have like a hierarchy of supervisors that say forward messages down to just the animals or just the dwarfs or something like that, where like the tree has kind of a structure of what messages should go?
Yes, you can do that. This is load theme, right? And this is me jelly light. All right. This is not how you write to Elixir, apparently. And let's find the location for now. Is this location.ex? All right. So what do we have if we go to the very top of the file? This is what you asked about. Oh, he left. He's not here anymore. Def struct is a way of marking a location as a particular object that has some default values and some specific keys and it's allowed to have, right? It's a gen server. Lines 14 through 16 are what I was describing just now. It's this registry that keeps track of the references. The things I didn't show you before, the other callback was this init callback. And I'm going to have to explain so much stuff I haven't covered. Oh my God. All right. Underscore, underscore, module, underscore, underscore is a way to refer to the current module. Okay? I am not entirely sure now that I'm 6 months after writing this line of code that it was such a good idea to do it that way, but I thought it was cool. So essentially what this is doing is it is asserting that what we are getting inside this init function is a world.location struct. If we don't get that, it will error out and saying you can't start this. This init function is called after start link. It returns either OK and the state for the process, or it errors out and then the process dies. But this is where the state is actually initialized when you start a new gen server. Okay? If you don't define init, use gen server defines one for you that will by default kind of fall through and pass whatever you give it to as the state, because that's a reasonable default. Dear Lord, my brain is fried. I'm sorry, I'm trying to answer your question, but I can't remember it. Yes, that's. I know I'm doing that, but you asked a question. Oh, right, the heartbeat. The heartbeat, that's what that was. I'm not completely crazy, just mostly. Is it, God. Timers.ex, that's promising. It's probably at the very bottom with my luck. So most of this code should make some sense. This is a fairly common pattern, actually, so it's kind of nice to be able to see it. Start link is what I told you about. If you're going to connect this to an application or supervision tree, this function is useful. I have 2 init functions because I'm overloading the operators. I had to do that for my tests because it turns out if everything starts having a heartbeat when I write my tests, I have no idea what's going on because they'll start to do things I don't want them to do. So I have to tell them, you get to be alive, but don't actually tick. And if I start the heartbeat, I go down to new timer, which is this function. I am so lucky. Where can I go down? I'm losing a bit of my pep. I'm not jumping around anymore. This is actually exactly what we wanted, so that's good. The new timer function uses this package called PE-tick. I could actually use the built-in Erlang timer. I don't know why I'm using this anymore. Every second, every 1,000 milliseconds, I'm going to have a callback, and the callback is defined as a tuple of the current module and the function send heartbeat. Okay? So every second, I'm going to call timers.send heartbeat. Okay? So far, so good? I use dispatch. This is very, very similar. This is actually exactly the pattern for using a registry for pub sub, publish, subscribe, right? When I create a new mob, a dwarf or a bird, I register it under the tick registry as something that is subject to time. So I dispatch to this registry, to everything that is subject to time, this function. So for every entries that is subject to time, run this code. And so it destructures entries to a process reference and something I don't care about. And then I cast to that process reference the tick function. And then it does something.
New timer thing has def E instead of def.
Line 31?
Yeah.
Yes, line 31 is a private function. I don't want just anyone to call that.
Oh, okay.
I never covered private functions, did I? I'm sorry. It was a lot of material. Yes, def P is a private function. I am now so happy I decided to open my code for you all to just like look at and wonder and judge how bad a teacher I am. It's only called on line 8. Actually, that's not true. I think there's a start function as well somewhere. Yeah, stop heartbeat, start heartbeat, right? And the function start heartbeat, stop, stop, start. Yeah, it does this. It does a new timer as well. And I decided to make those stop and start heartbeat functions synchronous because I was really hoping that this would be like a game and that synchronously people might want to stop the world, which is pause the game. I was getting way ahead of myself on that one. So now I'm going to open the mob code, and that's going to be fun because the first thing you're going to look at is going to look useless. This is, oh, there's more stuff than I remembered. Okay, maybe there's, oh, that's right, I just made this change. Sorry, it's a work in progress. I did this on the plane on the way here, I think. Use mobs.mob template is where I pull in most of the code, most of the logic. So we're going to go into that. And I'm going to open myself to ridicule by trying something that I'm not sure will work. Because apparently not. All right, well then.
Max just failed you.
It did not fail me, it just worked in a different way.
You added a slash to your precious file.
So, remember this use thing? Well, this def macro underscore underscore using underscore underscore, blah, that is the weird code that gets called when you do use something. So when you do use gen server, something like this happens.
You have to have that defined.
Right, otherwise, no bueno.
So then the child or whoever's inheriting this gets all this below?
Yes, it gets all of the functions that are defined and whatever else whatever other code might be run under this, in this do block.
How is that different than how you were using mob template in your other mob, in your dwarf.
This is how I'm using it. I just use mob template, and it brings in all of this.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's, yeah.
It is different than importing, yes. You're going to ask me how it's different than importing. Importing makes the functions available inside the module only. So you can't call those functions from outside the module. So if you did import IO in here, you could call inspect inside your code, but I could not do mob template.inspect. Don't think about that too hard. Just try it later.
Okay.
The thing I was going to show is not here. Timer ref. Oh, it's in the controller. That's right. I made this change too. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Okay. So because I decided, I'm going to explain this just like so you know why we're going where we're going, that a mob, by the way, if you don't know what a mob is short for mobile. Like it's some kind of creature that can move around and do things.
I thought it was just like a mob of dwarves.
Yeah, mob is an old like mud term, and I realized that no one plays mods anymore. So like my heart breaks. But essentially the mob is the front-facing process. Like that's the one that's in the locations, that's the one people can look at and so forth. But it shouldn't be able to do anything, it should be dumb. So there's a controller that is going to have the logic and be the brain. The idea behind this is it might be cool to, as a human, take control of a dwarf at some point. Then you replace it with a human controller. So we're going to go into the generic mob controller because I give the best names ever. You know, I don't know what code you're going to see when I open this. Right, init, there you go. And there's to-dos everywhere because that's how clean I am. Line 13, on the init happens after the process has been created, before the state has been set. So I register the current process in the tick registry under the key subject to time with the value self.
So he's a subscriber now.
Yes, right.
Do they get cleaned out of the registry on their own when they die? When the process dies?
I don't have an answer. I should have an answer to this. I feel like I really should have known the answer to that. I want to say yes, but I don't know. In practice, it's not a big problem because sending is fire and forget. So if you send a message to a page that's not there, it'll just disappear. Like Erlang doesn't care. But I don't know.
And if you're not having a lot of failures, your registry wouldn't get too big.
Well,
I'm always imagining when I hear about Erlang, like stuff coming to life and dying all
yeah, that's exactly what's happening here. I'm sure I have, somewhere further down, I have a way to give birth. Oh, no, I moved that into the mob itself because I'm working with sexual and asexual reproduction right now. Well, I have dwarves and I have birds, and birds have to lay eggs. Yeah, I never thought I'd be writing this kind of code, but there you are.
Did you play WAP?
What?
The Wheel of Time mode?
Oh, I have not touched the Wheel of Time mud yet. I mean, there must be one or two other cool things I can show you in like the minute we have left. Let's see, timers, locations, mobs, controllers.
I saw some task async stuff. Is that all built in?
Ah, where did you see that?
One of the files.
Yeah, it was in the dwarf, I think. So
Yeah. The yield. You get all this for free?
that, yeah, 12. You get line 12, like line 11 built in. This is my tiny circuit breaker, by the way. There was a problem in my code. Well, let's say there's one process which is responsible for giving birth to new mobs. and because I haven't balanced out giving birth and dying and things like that, it receives a lot of messages about having to give birth. So at some point, things die because it takes too long for them to try and give birth. So this is a distributed idea. I basically delegate the waiting for the new process to be born to another process that I create just for that purpose, right? So line 5, birth, that's .async, right? I just create a task and I just tell it, go give birth. Just do whatever you have to do. And then on line 12, I say, you know what? Just wait 50 milliseconds for that to come back. And if it hasn't, kill it. I do not care. So this is because if I just do task.yield birth 50 and I don't do the task shutdown, then that task is still running. So I don't actually want it to finish. I want it to actively say, nope, don't wait for this. We're done. Life is over.
So that yield 50, if it hasn't finished in 50, it returns like a false or something equivalent.
Yes.
And it just keeps running. So you would maybe you have that in some other situation where you're checking it every so often.
Right. Yeah, you could do that. The thing I have to check now that I explained this to you guys is, can I actually remove that message from the mailbox of the process that's trying to give birth? I don't know, because if I can't do that, well, I guess if I can't do that, it'll just kind of give birth until it's done spawning mobs. I have a Reaper process. It takes corpses and it makes corpses out of mobs. It actually doesn't do that anymore because I had to move the code around, but it was a really cool idea. And as I'm learning, actually, let's take a look at, this is Dorf. Do we have anywhere lifespan 0? No. All right. The generic mob controller might have that. That's 0. That's it. Decrement lifespan. Oh, this is in the mob. Sorry. What I'm looking for is one of the calls where I defined that the first element of the tuple is stop, because the mob should die now. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to look for stop. Did I not type stop correctly? I'm just very bad at this. You guys know that? Apparently just haven't done that. All right. Sure. See, right there. I knew it was somewhere. In the human controller, apparently. It's not how you do that at all. Oh yeah, right. Yeah, welcome to TCP input. Falling down to Erlang for some of this stuff. When I receive quit, when the user types quit, I obviously want to just close everything. So I leave the location for the real world. And then I just tell the process to stop. And it's a normal stop, hence the next atom. And then it has some state because why not? It needs it. Then it will just shut down.
Oh, go ahead.
The dwarves keep mining?
The dwarves don't mine yet. There's nothing to mine yet.
Or does the world keep going after you've logged out?
Oh yeah, the world keeps going. Yeah, of course. Yeah. When you start the project, right, it spawns a bunch of locations, spawns a bunch of mobs in random locations, and then they can move around, they can try to mate, and they can die. That's all they can do right now, but that's not bad, right?
So what happens when you come back? What do you come back to?
You generally, in my experience, you come back to a dead system because there were too many mobs. But what you would come back to is just the same locations and probably maybe new mobs, right? Just moving around, doing their thing.
What is the scope of a location?
Wait, hang on, you're skipping. He had a question.
Okay. So line 115, there's a colon in TCP, and then
Yeah.
do the atoms have actual
atoms like this are also how you refer to Erlang modules.
Oh, okay.
So this is an Erlang module that you send a message to.
Okay.
It's the same thing as this, actually, in a way. Like these human controllers, you could call, like, I think, :human underscore controllers, and I think it would send a message to that.
Okay.
I was just curious, sort of conceptually, what is a location for your game? Like, is it a single square? Is it like
Oh,
a mountain or like?
there is not an answer to this right now. The way it's built is basically a graph. So, like, the locations have pathways between them,
Okay.
right? Because I've hard-coded those 5 that exist, right now there's like a bar, upstairs from a bar, outside from a bar, to the right of there and to the north of there, to the east and to the north. But it's arbitrary, right? Like, depending on what I want to do, I could have a single location that is like an amphitheater, and so like there's room for 500 people or something. Yeah, the world's my oyster. I can do whatever I want. By the way, if you guys want to like hack on this, or you're welcome to.
It's a pull request.
Yeah, pull request, whatever. There are like a couple of boards and projects on GitHub for things to implement. One of them, somebody requested like a kind of watch so you could check like the in-game time or something like it. I have no idea how to I don't want to implement that yet. So if somebody else wants to, for instance, that's a great thing to do, right?
I don't know if it's a big topic or not, but I was just kind of wondering how this, if you want to distribute to multiple VMs like over the internet,
Yeah.
like the code, does it mostly work the same way and the messages just have to go over the network?
Yes. There are things you have to change, of course, right? Like, for instance, you have to do the discovery, so the nodes have to know about each other, but there are known ways to do that. And once they know about each other, you have to decide who runs what code. But again, there are also ways to do that and distribute and do load balancing, like he said before. It's so simple, it's unbelievable. Like, I would have to do a bit of Googling, I think. Like, I know about 80% of how I could show you that 2 REPLs can be connected to each other, because when you start a REPL, you actually start a node. And then I could send a message from one REPL to another.
Okay. The network. You could chat with your buddy through the REPL, essentially.
Yes, you could do that. Yeah. I mean,
Mob.send or whatever.
Look, don't get me started on the crappy messaging apps we have right now. I want to build a distributed encryption-based system with Erlang and Elixir, and if you say WhatsApp, I'm going to tell you something not owned by Facebook.
Have you seen?
Bit of it. It's okay. It's 10:05. We're all done. Like, just my brain's fried.
IPFS?
Tell me what it stands for.
Interplanetary File System.
I've heard of it. Tell me more.
It's basically BitTorrent made into a file system.
Of course it is. Why wouldn't it be?
Yeah, you have content addressable, so it's hash-based addresses. It's not the content. It's based on the content. So you
Right.
put the hash into your IPFS browser.
See ya.
But anyway, they've made a encrypted messaging service
Interesting.
over a distributed peer-to-peer.
That reminds me of when, in the early days of Gmail, people did a file system on Gmail. And Google kind of shut that down after a couple months.
Yeah, I remember that when you launch multiple Gmail because you get free 5 gigs.
Right. You know what? We're going to have to put a stop to that. That's going to be a problem for us really fast.
There's a similar thing to IPFS messaging over Ethereum, which is like similar to
Yeah.
Bitcoin,
Right.
called Swarm, called Whisper. And there's all this crazy stuff happening in the peer-to-peer distributed world. But anyways, I thought I'd bring that up for anyone who's interested. Look into IPFS. It's super cool. Like, brew, install IPFS, and just screw around with it.
All right. Whew. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for coming.